Okay.
Hello.
We
Can
can
you hear
start,
me?
Professor Shiv. And I
We can
request
start.
everyone else
It's a
to be
very
muted.
bad connection. Sorry. I already filled my name and it's written that I am in the show. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you. Okay.
Yes.
So let's start now. So Namaskar, you all are welcome.
It's
We
very
are here
bad
to
sound connection.
once again,
It's
Namaskar,
very
you all are
bad
welcome.
connection.
We are here to pay homage to Mahatma
Excuse me.
Gandhi and to spread the principles and values of Gandhi. We have a very distinguished guest today with us to speak more about Gandhi and his philosophy. Now, for the formal inauguration of today's session, I would like to invite the Ambassador of India to Portugal, Her Excellency Mrs. K. Nandini Singhlaji. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Namaskar, boa tarde. Welcome to Gandhi Katha. I'm delighted that we're wrapping up our 2-year celebrations of Mahatma Gandhi's 150th birth anniversary celebrations in Portugal with a befitting Gandhi Katha by the renowned Gandhian Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishnan to learn how to stay safe from COVID-19 by emulating Gandhiji's wellness practices. As many of you know, in the last 2 years, our embassy has undertaken numerous activities across Portugal to celebrate Gandhiji. We projected Gandhiji's messages on Portugal's historic buildings. We released the first ever Gandhi stamp in Khadi. A road was named after Mahatma Gandhi. We planted 150 trees. We held a cycle rally and distributed solar lamps to school children to propagate Gandhiji's messages of environmentalism. We also gave talks on Gandhiji in Portuguese schools and distributed Portuguese comic books to school children in nearly 50 schools. They were eminent Portuguese people who spoke in our Satya Varta series about how Gandhiji inspired them. We installed a bust of Gandhiji on the island of Madeira, where Mahatma Gandhi visited in the year 1906. And we will now formally end these 2-year celebrations on the 2nd of October by installing a second bust of Mahatma Gandhi in Albufeira in southern Portugal. But friends, notwithstanding all these activities, I believe that the most pertinent and apt celebration of Gandhiji in today's situation is the Gandhi Katha that we are having today. Why do I say this? For more than 9 months now, the world has been traumatized by the COVID-19 pandemic, and people are becoming even more anxious as the world prepares to face a second wave of infections without a vaccine or a treatment in place. If there is one question today that grabs everybody's attention, the question is, how can I escape coronavirus? So I believe everyone everywhere is interested in knowing if Gandhiji's wisdom can give us some answers. It is no surprise, therefore, that Dr. Radhakrishnan has held this Gandhi Katha in, I believe, almost 130 countries, more than 100 countries. We are honored that she has spared her time for us in Portugal too. I would like to mention a special Portuguese connection here. This Gandhi Katha, I believe, has been approved by the executive committee set up by our Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, to oversee the global celebrations of Gandhi at 150. As some of you already know, the Prime Minister of Portugal, His Excellency Dr. Antonio Costa, is a member of this executive committee. He was invited by Prime Minister Modi to join as a member. In fact, Prime Minister Antonio Costa visited India on 19 December last year to attend the meeting of this executive committee in New Delhi. So I'm particularly pleased that the people of Portugal are able to access this session today. And friends, in my mind, there is absolutely no doubt that Gandhiji's wisdom holds the key to not just health and wellness, but to living life the way it is meant to be. Gandhiji became known as the Mahatma or Great Soul not because he freed India from the British, but because he freed himself from his own human limitations. From an ordinary boy who stole, who lied, and even fought, he transformed himself into a saint by his sheer will. And he did this not by retreating to solitude in a Himalayan cave, but in the hurly-burly of everyday life. He showed by his own example that spirituality can be practiced in the most difficult of spheres, politics, and that a life that is guided by our inner voice or spirit is not only possible, but is the only way to live a fulfilling life. That's why he often said, "My life is my message." While there are numerous pearls of Gandhiji's wisdom, I believe that the spiritual core of his philosophy is what the world needs to hear during this pandemic. Gandhiji said, "Take self responsibility for your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well being. Don't depend on the outside world for your well being and happiness because the keys to your well being are only with you, not with anybody else. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. You have to be what you want. If you want love, be love, and love will come to you. If you want happiness, be happy. If you want health, be healthy. Practice being healthy." Now, how can we be these things, we ordinary mortals? I guess by realizing that we are more than our bodies, our minds, and our emotions. By becoming aware that we are fundamentally the spirit, the energy, or consciousness, whatever you want to call it, which is eternal, which is full of love, joy, positivity, only the good things of life. I believe if we are aware of this higher consciousness at all times and let ourselves be guided by its higher wisdom, our self worth and happiness will not depend on how others treat us, or on how much success or money we have, or on whether a pandemic is threatening the world. We realize that it is not the external situation, but our interpretation and reaction to the situation that causes us suffering. And when we master our reactions to all life situations by learning to gracefully accept whatever life brings us, and by simply dealing with them in the most intelligent way possible, without blaming ourselves or anyone else, we will be happy, we will be healthy, we'll be at peace, no matter what is happening outside, even when it is a pandemic like the coronavirus. And why do I say this? Friends, I believe such an attitude of acceptance, peace, positivity, and hope will invariably reduce your stress levels, enhance immunity, and keep viruses at bay. And being guided by your inner wisdom will insulate you from the global panic and paranoia, while at the same time ensuring that you take sensible precautions and take care of your body by exercising regularly, eating sensibly, and being emotionally centered. On a personal note, I would like to vouch for the effectiveness of this attitude myself. I have just finished a 2-week home quarantine after returning from India and tending to my parents and brother who were all infected by COVID-19. Even though I was in close proximity with them in India for 3 weeks, I did not contract the infection. In fact, very honestly speaking, I feel even healthier and blessed for having been given the opportunity to be there for my loved ones in their time of need. I would like to share one more personal thing for the benefit of our audience. I have not had the flu or fever even once in the last 20 years, despite living in different countries. I'm sharing this here not to boast about myself, In fact, it's considered very unfortunate or unlucky to make a statement like this in public. But I'm saying it because I want to show that if it is possible for me to remain healthy and immune to viruses, it is possible for anybody. Because as everyone who knows me will confirm, I am nobody special. I don't follow any particular diet or follow any kind of special physical or spiritual practice. I'm a regular person, and I want to say that being healthy is the natural or regular state of being because our bodies, minds, and spirits are supposed to work in harmony. So, today, friends, I look forward to hearing more from Dr. Radhakrishnan about how we can nurture this inherent harmony that exists in each one of us by embracing Mahatma Gandhi's timeless wisdom in our own lives. I wish each and everyone who's listening to this the very best of health, happiness, and well being. Thank you and namaskar.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your words and for your even personal examples, which are really very important. And let me very briefly introduce Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, and then she will start her speech. So, Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna was born and brought up in Mahatma Gandhi's ashram in Sevagram. She has cultivated a strong ideological connect with Mahatma Gandhi's ideals since childhood. Since the past 2 decades, she has attempted different ways of spreading Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy to people in India and abroad by giving lectures, workshops, and Gandhi Katha. Dr. Radhakrishna has already traveled more than 42 countries and already presented more than 148 lectures and Gandhi Katha all over the world. Dr. Shobhana is the chief functionary of SCOPE, Gandhian Forum for Ethical Corporate Governance. Well, with a big round of applause, we welcome Dr. Radhakrishna with deep gratitude and respect for her efforts to promote Gandhiji, peace, and harmony all over the world. So, Dr. Radhakrishna, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Srimati Nandini Singlaji, for your kind message and the support. I'm also very thankful to Professor Shiv and Professor Rosa for being with me here. Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. Kasturba Gandhi's sacrifice, suffering, and the contributions in making Mohan into the Mahatma and inspiring thousands of women to fight against injustice and racial discrimination in South Africa and in the freedom struggle in India is extraordinary. I express gratitude to the Embassy of India, Lisbon in Portugal, for hosting the Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means. His spirituality, his environmental credo, and his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world will celebrate the UN International Day of Nonviolence, and in India, we celebrate it as Gandhijayanti. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Portugal and convey my warm wishes to the Portuguese and the Indian community who have joined me online today. Mahatma Gandhi's name finds resonance across the continents. and continues to inspire countless people through his teachings of nonviolence. His Excellency Mr. Antonio Costa, Prime Minister of Portugal, visited India in December 2019 and said, and I quote, "Independent and democratic India was built upon Gandhi's vision on pluralism and diversity. The world has still much to learn from it." He also said that at a time when the world faces the challenges to democratic model of development and inclusiveness is ravaged by civil wars and conflicts in different continents and struggles to deal with a climate crisis, Gandhi's legacy remains as relevant as ever, not only for India and Portugal, but for the entire world. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narration. I have given talks on Gandhi Katha in more than 100 countries hosted by the Indian Mission. During the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji in the past 2 years. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about the greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many world leaders. Gandhiji used to begin and end his day with prayers. These were prayers from all the religions of the world, Sarva Dharma Prarthana. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection. The devotional poetry of the saint poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of the life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence, and must have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural backgrounds from around the world, and he actively encouraged friendships across religions. One of the legacies of Mahatma Gandhi to the world is nonviolent conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues for establishing unity, harmony, and brotherhood. In the ashram prayers in the morning and evening, the first verse from the Ishopanishad, the shortest Upanishad in India, used to be recited. Isha vasyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyan jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitha ma gridha kasya swidhanam. That everything in this universe belongs to God. Nothing really belongs to us. Enjoy the objects of the world in an attitude of perfect non-attachment. Enjoy it with a feeling of sacrifice, taking to the extent that is necessary for you, and leave the rest for others in the society. Never ever crave the possession of others. Nothing really belongs to us. So I will play this same sentiment which talks about renounce and rejoice, which Gandhiji told as the essence of Indian civilization and the essence of his life, but through a Gandhi Katha hymn or dhun in Hindi, which is Na yah tera, na yah mera, Ishwar ka yah raj hai.
Na yah tera, na yah mera, na yah tera, na yah mera, Ishwar ka yah raj hai, Ishwar ka yah raj hai.
Even after 7 decades have passed since Gandhiji passed on, in every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his visions and actions are of an enduring significance for all times and places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, personal, or public life. Gandhiji stands out as the champion not only of political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy in today's world. He believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, non-violence, purity of means, love, self-control, forgiveness, friendliness, respect, compassion, mercy, and so on. For Gandhiji, the principle behind satyagraha or non-violent resistance and civil disobedience was by non-cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, soul force through self-sacrifice and suffering. For him, the consideration for the sufferings of fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His belief and actions that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by nonviolent means. His legacy of satyagraha is widely recognized and practiced the world over and is seen in many moments for civil rights in the contemporary world. Gandhiji's environmental practices or the environmental credo is based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. He had warned about the unsustainability on the global scale and that greed will be the main reason for the environmental degradation and ecological crisis almost a century ago. Gandhiji was the first environmentalist much before the world was preoccupied with the concerns for environment and ecology, and with his stunning premonition and knowledge, he had declared that the earth has enough for man's needs, but not for man's greed. He had also said, the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us. Equality for women within the society was a principle Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants. It may well have been keeping in mind the very basic unit of human organization, a village or a county. His vision of Gram Swaraj, which is self-reliant, independent, self-governed village, is built on the premises of sustainable development and growth. That is the need of the hour. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. On that path, hundreds of worldly teachers had already walked. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards and find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. And that he did by repeated questioning. And that question was, Ko aham, who am I? What am I? And what is the real purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization Since the past 5,000 years, the answer came to Gandhiji from his inner voice that the purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said, "Truth is God, Satya hi Parameshwar hai." Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of being truthful, of being good and doing good to others. The second realization was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. But because of this understanding of oneness, he had no enemies. He did not want to settle scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, and respect to everyone, and that was one of his traits. He respected individuals as individuals without attaching labels. And that is one more trait that we see in him. Another trait was that he remained positive and calm in spite of all the challenges he faced. And another one is that he treated all work as God given work and did all the tasks with equal reverence. Romarola, the French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote the biography of Mahatma Gandhi in 1924. And later on, Gandhiji came to meet him in 1931 to Switzerland. And he wrote, and I quote, "This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action, and he follows a straight line, but he never stops." In 1931, during his stay at Villeneuve in Switzerland, Gandhiji met Pierre Cerisole, the great pacifist leader. Gandhiji had heard about Cerisole's movement, but desired to hear from the man himself. Pierre told him that during the war, a village schoolmaster had refused to serve his 3 months as a conscript in the name of Christ. For this, he was first put in a lunatic asylum and then in the prison. Pierre was deeply impressed by this act and followed the same path. Many others followed Cerisole's example, and each year many men refused the conscription service. Cerisole told Gandhiji that all wanted to serve as citizens, but not as army men. Gandhiji told him about his experience in South Africa and India. Cerisole said, "I'm afraid our people in Europe are not like yours in India and are not ready for such acts as these." There was a pause. And then, in a low and infinitely gentle voice, as though sorry for the terrific rebuke that he was implying, Gandhiji said, "Are you sure it is the people who are not ready, Mr. Cerisole?" "Oh," exclaimed Pierre, and we were all silent, accepting the challenge, wrote Muriel Lester, who was witness to this conversation. "I see what you mean. You are right. It is we who are failing. It is leadership that we lack. Is that what you mean?" In the same small voice, Gandhiji answered, "I must confess, Mr. Cerisole, I do not seem to have come across leaders in Europe, not of the sort that the times call for." "Tell us what qualities you think a leader for this age would need," Pierre argued. realization of God every minute of 24 hours, announced Gandhiji. And if a man asked, "What do you mean by God?" asked Pierre. Gandhiji replied, "I would answer, truth is God, and the way to find Him is non-violence." I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun in Hindi that elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as having harmony between thought, words, and deed.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान।
Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for us all. But the effort has to begin from a point where you are standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical. And he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean he was very busy. What we mean is the action of putting ideas or beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, "An ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching." Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines as environment, economics, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, politics, and much more. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. John Haynes Holmes was a pacifist, an anti-war activist, and the founder of American Civil Liberties Union. He had met Gandhiji in London in 1931 and later on in Delhi in 1947. He found Mahatma Gandhi's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. He said, and I quote, "I believe that he is unquestionably the greatest man living in the world today. When I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ." Time magazine had listed out three most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or the Salt Satyagraha. And the third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. There is a common thread of nonviolence in all three. In 1904 in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book Unto This Last, barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life overnight and started leading a community life of self-control, voluntary poverty, bread labor, and sarvodaya, welfare of all. He established 4 ashrams in his lifetime, 2 in South Africa, and 2 in India. The last one was in 1936 in Sevagram, Wardha, where Kasturba Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, and the ashram community lived in poverty like the common villagers of India. The ashrams were his ideals of non-violent face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity, the first being Satyagraha. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary seekers and satyagrahis, for offering the highest sacrifice of their lives in the non-violent freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor, to establish their self-respect and dignity. I am happy to inform you that I was born in the last ashram in Sevagram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society, and his constructive work was integral to his politics. Gandhiji carried out all his experiments in health and wellness in the ashrams through nature cure, diet control, fasting, hydrotherapy, sunbath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day. The ashram inmates not only participated but modified and validated them and still continue to practice them till today. And that points to the relevance of these practices. Ivan Illich, the Croatian Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram ashram in 1978 and he spent a week in the ashram. Every day he sat in Bapu Kuti for a long time and said, and I quote, "This hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness." Though Gandhiji's role and contributions to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health and well-being. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Gandhiji's message to the world on the vital question of health and well-being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message was very simple, easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self-control, reduce the wants, follow the tradition, cultural practices, and the values, follow the environmental credo, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. Gandhiji was very interested in health and wellness and remained ever vigilant about his own health as well as of others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any disease come anywhere near us, and every person is responsible for looking after his or her body, mind, and spirit impeccably. He advised that in order for keeping physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, we should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of the 5 elements that are found in nature. And that's what has been told by our ancient seers and rishis of India. And these 5 elements are air, water, fire, earth, and space. For the wellness of our bodies, the balance and harmony between all these 5 elements is necessary. For Gandhiji, the outside universe was but a reflection of the inside universe. he repeated time and again that the universe is compressed in the atom. There is not one law for the atom and another for the universe. It was based on his actual spiritual experience that gave him the conviction that the moral principles have no meaning unless they can be made to serve as the guide of conduct in the daily affairs of man. The Sanskrit proverb, Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande, says, you are the universe within the universe. As with the self, so is the universe. What is going on with you, within you, is same as what is going on in the universe. From the mind body perspective, Gandhiji's standpoint was that health is an optimal integration of body, mind, spirit, soul, and environment. Environment is our extended body. There is a nice Vedic expression from the ancient traditions of India which says, as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the universal body, so is the cosmic body. As is the universal mind, so is the cosmic mind. Very few people know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergencies, serving patients as frontline workers selflessly in the service of humanity. In the Spanish influenza outbreak of 1918, Gandhiji opened up a Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center and treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity and maintain physical distancing. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, gave them correct information, helped them to remain positive through prayers and meditation, and taking care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. On November 10th, 1918, he had said, our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self restraint, sanyam, or of imposing a limit on our acts, wants, and desire. In August 1942, Gandhiji wrote the book Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crises globally. First is the COVID-19 pandemic. The second is the serious and long-drawn financial crisis. And the third one is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Mahatma Gandhi, who had said, my life is my message. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family, connected as brothers and sisters. And whether we choose to see it or not, we only have one home, this planet Earth, our Mother Earth. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava, global citizen, and said that the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The current COVID-19 pandemic is a wake-up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. We will have to learn to live with COVID-19 now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Mahatma Gandhi to make the necessary changes in thought, action, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. Many lessons are very clear, and some are still unknown, surrounding us in uncertainty. This uncertainty is causing mental stress, anxiety, existential crisis, fear of extinction and death, and the mass psychology of living in depression and grief is pointing out towards this fact in the current pandemic. We are collectively grieving for the loss of our known lifestyle. But if we still return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing after money, power, position, lifelong consumerism, then COVID 19 has given the wake up call. This kind of lifestyle of empty consumerism and mass distractions has only increased the difference between the rich and the poor, created the huge carbon footprint, increased the misery of the invisible poor masses. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation, prayer, and chanting of Ramanama relieves the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain, when you feel a loss of control over the situation. And when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up, the thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times, but a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune systems of our bodies and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces relaxation, positivity, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, fearlessness, and remaining positive. Therefore, Gandhiji comes across as the greatest healer and the wellness guru or the lifestyle guru who comes free of cost. The Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in the times of crisis. Gandhiji's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, positive attitude, positive thinking, empowerment of self-care, and care in the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting the Gandhi Katha. My special thanks to all of you who have joined me online today. I will end with the peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let all be happy. Let all be healthy. Let all experience auspiciousness. Let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om, peace, peace, peace. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light, I will end today's Gandhi Katha with the hymn Shubha Mangal Ho. May there be auspicious good. May there be good. May the earth be auspicious. May the sky be auspicious. May every particle on earth be auspicious.
Thank you so much for your words, Dr. Radhakrishna. It was going so well that we can continue listening another 1 hour or so. But okay, we have time constraints, and maybe in coming future we can again plan with you something. So, for concluding remarks, I would like to invite Professor Rosa Maria Perez, who is in herself a great reference on Indian studies all over the world. So, Professor Perez, floor is yours. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself.
Professor,
Sorry,
please mute yourself.
I can't see where.
Now we can hear you.
Where do I?
We can hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? So thank you so much, Dr. Radhakrishna, for this wonderful Gandhi Katha. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of India to Portugal, not only by bringing our two countries together, but by bringing all over these years the best of India to Portugal. Thank you so much for inviting. Thank you, Mrs. Priyadarshini, to invite me to join this wonderful celebration. And so I will be brief, and I'd like to stress some of, which is impossible to do in 3 minutes, but to stress the main contributions as an anthropologist of Gandhi, not only to my personal, but also to my life, to my professional life, to my academic life, and I would say to our world's life. So I will start by Ahimsa, and it seems it may look like a common sense to immediately relate Gandhiji and Ahimsa. However, given the contemporary sway of negative passions in politics and the ever-present potential for violence, Ahimsa should, to me, be at the core of the world politics. And sometimes we tend to forget how original Gandhi was, how an original thinker he was, in the sense that he was a pioneer of political concepts inherently based on Indian traditions. And even though I would say that they belong to the world, Gandhiji was indeed, as Dr. Radhakrishna mentioned at a certain point, a supporter of individual rights, and Swaraj for him was the highest form of personal freedom. In a world where human rights are systematically violated, as we know, Gandhiji's conception of human rights should be adopted and adapted as the universal declaration of human rights of our days. He was also an advocate of civil liberties, and Gandhiji's notion of equality and justice was enormously inclusive. The Indian nation, as he conceived it, should not exclude the religious or cultural difference. And I would briefly remind this position against the division of India between Hindus and Muslims. Gandhiji argued, and it's so crucial, that equality is of fundamental importance as the warrant of dignity of every person. He sustained the idea that social discrimination should be abolished not only in Indian society, but in any possible society. And we all know the important role that Gandhiji played in order to try to abolish social discrimination, more specifically to abolish untouchability. Gandhiji, and we also tend not to underscore it enough, was, to me, without any doubt, a theorist of a modern political canon. His conceptual contributions included, of course, Swaraj, Satyagraha, Sarvodaya, Swadeshi, and Ahimsa. This, to me, should not be considered notions of the past, nor exclusive to India. Indeed, as I already said, suggest they belong to the world, a world under unfortunately a permanent threat of alienation, where men should be equal and entitled to justice and rights, the rights that Gandhiji advocated so many years ago. Gandhiji is always present in my life, as he has been present in the life of my son and now of my grandchildren. In my courses at university, whenever I speak of Gandhiji, I feel very moved to observe that the extent to which my students get indeed touched, moved, both, I would say, more than intellectually, emotionally speaking. Indeed, through Gandhiji, they are introduced to the essence itself of humanism, a humanism and human compassion that did not have a parallel in Gandhiji, not in our time. So I permanently thank the privilege of being able to read and reread Gandhiji so many times. And I thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Professor Rosa, for your kind words. As a true friend of India and a person well accomplished in studies of societies and cross-cultural influences, your thoughts to us today matter a lot. And I know that you are a real Gandhian by heart, and you will give it as a gift to generations that will come, teaching in India, in Lisbon, in Portugal, and also in other places. So I am also very grateful to Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, Gandhi Forum for Ethical Corporate Governance, for giving Embassy of India, Lisbon, and the entire Portugal the opportunity to listen to this engaging katha. The katha brings out, in a very enchanting way, the wisdom from Mahatma Gandhi's life, interspersed with hymns and chants which are based on Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. They set the spiritual and musical tempo, if I may say. Although this seminar marks the beginning of the end of the 150th birth anniversary celebrations of Mahatma Gandhi in the world, the words of Mahatma and his message of humanism and compassion are truly timeless. His uprightness, his simplicity, his surrender to the God, his compassion towards all are going to be symbols that we must follow as beacons for the guidance of the future generations. It truly brings out the philosophy of Vasudev Kutumbakam, which is a spiritual ethos that India has given to the world as a gift. And like our ambassador has already said, peace, wellness, and positivity within lead to total health inside and also outside in the world. There is no other more relevant time than now since the world wars, which Mahatma Gandhi himself witnessed, when this philosophy and humanism of Mahatma Gandhi are needed due to the anxiety and the panic of COVID-19. It is a time to rethink how we ought to live our lives. I once again thank you, Dr. Radhakrishna, and your team, our ambassador in Portugal, Mrs. Nandini Singla, Professor Rosa Maria Perez, Professor Shiv, and the many others who have joined us today online. Let us all be the change we want to see in the world. Thank you. Namaste.